So the other day, I had the privilege of sitting with Mr. Christopher Rutledge, who is the executive director at MACUA. Let me just get you the official breakdown. MACUA stands for Mining Affected Communities United in Action. And I had a lot of notes that I'd written down. And unfortunately, because of the interest of time, I couldn't go through all of my notes. And I wanted to share some of them with you. And I just wanted to share some of my thoughts, even inspired by that sit down with him. First and foremost, I just want to give you like a snapshot of the resources we actually have in South Africa as a country that maybe you've heard and maybe you're hearing for the very first time. This is from Wikipedia, but feel free to go and do your own research. I'm literally reading an excerpt from Mining in South Africa on Wikipedia. Diamond and gold production are now well down from their peaks, though South Africa is still fifth in worldwide gold production and remains a cornucopia of mineral riches. The country is also the world's largest producer of chrome, manganese, platinum, vanadium, and vermiculite. We're the world's largest producer as a country. South Africa is the world's second largest producer of ilmenite, palladium, rutile, and zirconium. It is also the world's third largest coal exporter. So in terms of coal exports globally, we're number 3. South Africa is also a huge producer of iron ore. In 2012, it overtook India to become the world's third biggest iron ore supplier to China, the world's largest consumers of iron ore. As a summary, in 2019, South Africa was the world's largest producer of platinum, the world's largest producer of chromium, the world's largest producer of manganese, the second largest world producer of titanium, the world's 11th largest producer of gold, the third worldwide producer of vanadium, the 6th largest world producer of iron ore, the 11th largest world producer of cobalt, and the 15th largest world producer of phosphate. It was the world's 12th largest producer of uranium in 2018. South Africa is incredibly endowed in terms of mineral resources. I mean, when I think of South Africa, I think of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is arguably the wealthiest country on earth as far as mineral resources is concerned. Sadly, because of global capital, sadly, because of the people that run the world, the people that mess around with currencies and the people that instigate social conflicts, that capture politicians, and the DRC is one of the poorest countries in the world. And South Africa, as much as it's a decent country, and we love it, of course, it is not as wealthy as it should be. South Africa should literally be one of the top 5 economies on earth if we were getting paid fair value for our mineral resources. Some of the notes that I wanted to raise, that maybe I did raise and maybe just want to emphasize. South Africa became formalized by the British Empire, became a British colony. And it became formalized from an economic perspective by people like Cecil John Rhodes. People may know him. He's also responsible for Rhodesia, northern and southern, which would be Zambia and Zimbabwe. In the formalization of South Africa as a union under the British and the formalization of government and the formalization of the economy, an important family comes to fore, which is still in South Africa by and large, the Oppenheimer family. Ernest Oppenheimer would move to South Africa, and he would be funded by JP Morgan in America, JP Morgan becoming one of the men that built America, a huge global financier. He would come and he'd set up Anglo-American, a company that's got its tentacles deep within the South African economy, the African economy, and the global economy at large. Anglo-American, of course, the Anglo being for English or the British, American being for America, funded by the British through the Central Bank of England, which funded Cecil John Rhodes De Beers, which was the biggest diamond producer in the world, which would be taken under Anglo-American with Ernest Oppenheimer. And the Central Bank of England funding coming from the Rothschild family, the infamous Rothschilds of global banking. Anglo-American. At a point, and Chris Rutledge would raise this, Anglo would be responsible for over 50% of the market cap of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. When there would be an uprising in South Africa, by black people. By black, I'm including Indians, I'm including coloreds. It would be Anglo-American under CEO Godsell, who would sit with Michael Spicer as well. And they would sit with the liberation movement leaders, people like Oliver Tambo and others, Thabo Mbeki being involved as well in those conversations to work out a transition, to say that they would fund them, they would sit with them so that they could preserve capital, minority capital. In that was born BEE, which was not created by black politicians or black leaders. It was created by white minority capital in South Africa. In BEE, people like Cyril Ramaphosa would come up. Cyril was a lawyer. He'd go and work in mining. He would be responsible for setting up the National Union of Mine Workers. And he would have a very favorable relationship with the son of Ernest Oppenheimer, being Harry Oppenheimer. He'd be the second generation wealth of the Anglo-American empire. Cyril would then become one of the beneficiaries of BEE. He'd chair the BEE Commission. Later on, his brother-in-law, Patrice Motsepe, would set up African Rainbow Minerals, become one of the wealthiest people in South Africa, one of the wealthiest people on the African continent, and a dollar billionaire. Saki Matozoma, Lazarus Zim, Mzi Khumalo, Mike Teke, Dr. Anna Mokhokong, Daphne Nkosi, and many other black faces would be given stakes in mines in order to become a buffer between black uprising and the white wealthy elite. I would sit with Rob Hersoff, third generation from the Hersoff family who became incredibly wealthy from Anglo-Fal mining and then Anglo-Fal Industries when they split. The Menel family, of which I think Brian Menel is the patriarch today, are also a big mining family in this country. Des Sacco of Assor Limited is a big beneficiary. Even new age politicians like Gayton McKenzie built his wealth after coming out from prison from mining interests as well. So mining has got a very deep relationship with our politics, with the governance, and we find ourselves here. More mines or mining companies would be set up. Some of the bigger mining companies outside of Anglo-American, which has subsidiaries like Kumba Iron Ore, Anglo-American Platinum, and arguably Anglo Gold Ashanti. Other companies would be Exxaro, Sibanye, Stillwater, Goldfields, Harmony Gold, Glencore, Northern Platinum, African Rainbow Minerals of Patrice Motsepe, BHP Billiton, amongst others, of course. Some of the bigger mines that you may not even know of in this country that is so resource rich would be Groot Geluk mine, which does coal, Sishen mine, Ergo mine, Mponeng mine, which is actually the deepest mine in the world, which goes almost 4 kilometers deep. Usasaletu mine, which is 3.4 kilometers deep. The Kimberley mine, obviously known for the big hole where Cecil John Rhodes and the Oppenheimers dug diamonds out. Palabora mine, which does copper. Mugala Kwena mine, which does platinum. These are some of the biggest mines, just for you guys to go and research out there. Some of the things that I touched on that I really didn't get a chance to really go deep into. In the transition from the apartheid government into post-democratic South Africa, led by the ANC largely, a lot of white capital left, a lot of it being beneficiaries of mining in this country. They would move to places like Australia, places like Canada, places like America, parts of Europe, etc. We have not done an audit of how much of those outflows have left this country. We have not done an audit on how many companies exist internationally now. People like Saki Matozoma would have some of their mining wealth sit in places like Australia. People like Mzi Khumalo would have some of their wealth sit in places like Zimbabwe, the DRC. And himself and Lazarus Zim would have some of their wealth sit in places like London. South African money that is sitting offshore and is not being invested in the country of its origin. Gwede Mantashe becomes a person of interest as the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. We speak about him, we laugh about him, Time has got a witty sense of human charisma. him and his big stomach. He'd been nicknamed the Tiger because of some messages that leaked. But Gwede Mantashe holds such an important position in mineral resources because he dishes mining licenses. He also becomes a gatekeeper for ordinary South Africans getting to mine their land. We speak about zamazamas, and we don't speak in very deep, dark detail of what zamazamas actually represent. Zamazamas being illegal miners, illegal artisanal miners in South Africa. Before the British formalized South Africa into a union, before we became a Republic of South Africa and the National Party ran South Africa under the apartheid government, before we became post-democratic South Africa with the ANC, we were an African continent. We had different groups of people and different tribal, cultural groups. And when gold was found, when diamonds were found, there were people that had already been mining. One of the communities that is popular is the Mapungubwe. But they were not the only people mining. We formalized, and in the formalization, many people, so-called foreigners, would rush to the Witwatersrand and other places to come and mine. People that today would call Mozambicans, people would call Zimbabweans, people would call people from Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Malawi, etc., were mining here, being exploited, being oppressed for the building of this wealth that ended up being funneled out of the country. Many of them with their citizenship from other countries would understand mining at a very intrinsic level, very deep level. And when some of the mines would be closed, they would go in and mine. Understanding, some of them having worked, some of them just understanding mining because it's all they know. It's almost like farming in this country. Farming didn't start with Afrikaners. It didn't start with big farming agricultural companies like your Clover, your ZZ2, your Afgri, your Wilderklaver, etc. There were black people, coloreds, others farming here. So small-scale farming is a thing. Luckily, it's not illegal. Small-scale mining, unfortunately, is because people like Gwede Mantashe don't allow it. They protect and they preserve. Like I said, with the Anglos and the likes having an incestuous relationship with politicians, they protect and they preserve the interests of these big mining companies that I mentioned. South Africans, other Southern Africans should be able to mine as they did in the past at a small scale in protected ways. But today we call these people zamazamas. When miners complain about being underpaid, as they did at London Mining, aka Lonmin, it would be people like Cyril Ramaphosa who founded and led one of the biggest marches in mines under Noom. He would be intricately involved with Lonmin Mining, sitting on the board, being a beneficiary, owning a stake through Shanduga, his holding company. And he would ask for concomitant action, which led to the gunning down and the murder of 34 miners and the injury of 78 more. A real-life example in our lifetime of animal farm, where the pigs in animal farms start working with the farm workers and they oppress the other farm animals for their benefit. Cyril, the political elite in this country, the politically affiliated and associated, they have become the pigs. They are working with big international mining conglomerates to oppress and exploit ordinary citizens of South Africa, Southern Africa, and Africa, including in places like Angola with oil, the DRC with its plethora of minerals, Zimbabwe, and other places. And they become the people that become the gatekeepers and the oppressors and the exploiters of people, including mine workers that are just asking for a fair wage. This is why we're having these conversations today. Who owns South African mines? A lot of foreigners. A lot of foreigners own stakes in the mines that mine the country. Who owns the mining supply companies? The companies that come and actually do the digging and do the geology, that do the, what's the term? When they're basically surveying the land to see how rich it is, how viable it is, etc. The surveying companies. A lot of them are foreign owned. They don't even get paid in South African rands. They get paid in dollars, if not euros. South Africans get to be workers if they're lucky. They get to work in the peripheries of mining, the transporting of people through the taxis, the owning of taverns and shebeens, the setting up of maybe cinemas, the educating of kids, the doctors, periphery businesses that are not at the core of a primary business like mining. And the money gets funneled out. They fund politicians. They give politicians a stake. And you realize that South Africa is a company. The scramble of Africa through the Berlin Conference became a scramble for Africa. And South Africa became British owned, like Zimbabwe. And Angola became Portuguese owned, like Mozambique. And then the French also took a stake in certain countries. Belgium owned Zaire, which became the DRC. But the French would own other companies which are French colonies. Some of them which are trying still to this day to break free. Burkina Faso with Ibrahim Traore, Mali, Guinea, that was still paying colonial taxes to their colonial masters. In this day and age, you realize that by and large, this country still serves America, the United Kingdom, Western Europe. And even our currencies are undervalued. I touched on that in our sit down with the Reserve Bank Governor Kganyago speaking about how the rand should be 7 rand to the dollar, whereas it's 18 rand. It's because these colonial powers still want to extract the minerals, the resources, even our agricultural produce at the cheapest price for them possible. Then they beneficiate. They take our diamonds to Antwerp, to the Middle East, to Israel. There are capturers like Dan Gertler, who has funded families in places like the DRC to make sure that they funnel resources to other parts of the world. They beneficiate them. They turn them into final goods. And then when we buy them here, American Swiss, again, these companies, American Swiss, Switzerland, your Browns, your Cartier, we buy them at 100, 1,000 times the price that we got when they were being exported as raw materials here. Our politicians, our government, act as a board of directors to ensure that the people don't make the country unstable and become problematic for big capital, locally and abroad. And outside of that, there are ambassadors. Johann Rupert of the Rupert Empire with the Rembrandt Group, Richemont, which is Swiss-based now. He would sit at the White House with Donald Trump, being the go-to guy because Trump refused to sit with Cyril without having Johann Rupert, the real head boy, there. The Oppenheimer family, who are now in their 4th generation, Nicky Oppenheimer after Harry Oppenheimer, and then Jonathan Oppenheimer after him. They still own a big chunk of our wealth. They're the biggest private landowner in Southern Africa. And they have interests across the African continent and globally. People like Christo Visa, who runs operations across the African continent and internationally as well. These are the proxies. Meanwhile, the government is just caretaker. And we ordinary South Africans just sit at the bottom. Just to work, just to benefit, begging for jobs. Because we clearly don't own this land and we clearly don't own the resources as well. A conversation that I touched on that I think is also fundamentally important is that a lot of these companies that operate should not be responsible for communities. What is the point of tax? What is the point of a government? What is the point of state-owned enterprises if not to serve the people? Why must companies be responsible for building schools and clinics and rehabilitating? Because we know these guys are here for a profit motive. They will not do the right thing. They will loot and they will cut corners and they will cheat and they will bribe as far as they can. For any administration of governance that wants to run the country or any other country moving forward, you really need to look into a form of saying, we will not leave a private company, a company that is profit-driven, to do the right thing. We will tax them accordingly. And in the absence of taxing them, maybe we need to speak about state ownership. The ANC used to speak about it. The Freedom Charter used to speak about it before the ANC was captured and Nelson Mandela's ANC sold out. Oliver Tambo's ANC sold out. These guys come in 1994 and all of a sudden Nelson Mandela has a beautiful house in Houghton. The Tambo family all of a sudden has a stunning house in Sandhurst. How can it be? The EFF would bring it up again through Julius Malema and others to say we need to go back to state ownership of the mines, of the land, of the banks, so that they serve the people. And anyone who wants to come and work and serve can just become a supplier. They can be foreigners. They can be international. They can be from anywhere, but the land belongs to the people. The banks belong to the people. The mines belong to the people. The farms belong to the people. And if it is not benefiting the people, then we don't want you here. That is why the United Arab Emirates is so wealthy. Why the Emiratis are so wealthy. Why they need foreigners to come and work there. We speak about Dubai and what it's become. South Africa could be Dubai. We've seen potential of that in Cape Town. We've seen potential of that in Sandton, Mhlanga, and in other small enclaves. The entire country could look like that if the resources, if the output was actually benefiting the people and not being looted to serve other people elsewhere. I think I'll close off here. A lot of these things are not going to change. I'm not really expecting them to change, at least not in my lifetime. I happen to just be a guy, born in Matateni Township in Newcastle, went to study at Rhodes University, Makanda. It was Grahamstown and I was still there. Went to do my postgrad in accounting at the University of Johannesburg, what used to be RAU, Randse Afrikaanse Universiteit, built by the Broederbond, a secret organization. I didn't know much, like most other people. I read some books, watched some documentaries, asked some questions, traveled around the country, traveled to other African countries, traveled around the world. And I got to realize that this world we're living in is an illusion. And I realized that it's too big for me to try and fight. Tupac Shakur would say a very beautiful, now famous line, that I'm not saying I will change the world, but I will spark the brain of the person that will change the world. And I think this is meant to be a message for many of us. For Christians, Jesus Christ was a rebel. He fought against the imperialist of the time, the capitalist of the time. That is why he was crucified. That's why he was killed. And he was put out for everyone to see. We see that in Tupac. We see that in Stephen Bantu Biko. We see that in Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. We see that in Ukrisani. Martin Tembisile Hani, who was gunned down outside his home. And we see it in so many other voices that are trying to educate and mentally liberate as many people as possible, saying that it can't be done by one person. Marcus Garvey tried and he got very far. It is up to you guys to take these seeds that we impart and to see how you can revolutionize your spaces, your communities, your world. Because the world is not being run right, and it can be run better. And sometimes capitalists get short-sighted, and they get greedy, and they sometimes milk the proverbial golden cow until it starts bleeding, until it can't feed its calves, until it gets infected and it dies. And then we ask, whatever happened to the cows? Whatever happened to the milk? What happened to the golden goose and the eggs? There were some short-sighted, greedy people that destroyed the game and the fun for everyone. And it's up to some of us to stop them, to change things, and to make the world a better place. Again, thank you to Christopher Rutledge and MACUA. Thank you to Lindsay, who organized the sit-down. And thank you to everyone who's an activist in every small way that they are in trying to make the world a better place. And to the capitalists, many of you are ill-informed and ignorant. Sit with us. Maybe we can show you a better way to make money and to stop being greedy, because it's not you maybe who will suffer. It will be your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, that will bear the cross of your sins today. Penuel the Black Pen.